introductions may well be in order. That's too bad, because no one needs to know my name. All you need to know is my story, and that's it. Someone just has to know the truth. Just so that they know this shit is out there. These things are real. I'm a crime scene analyst. It's a dark, horrible, and addictively fascinating job. I live in a city that is caught somewhere between the new millennia and the Industrial Revolution, and every facet of this lustreless gem is some island in time between those eras. Last year, I was called to a big, half-ruined apartment building, the kind that you can't believe that people are still living in. And it had been some giant family home 100 years ago, but some slumlord had turned it into a quick cash cow. It was a Midwest February, and every day was a pendulum, swinging between the cold of winter and the rains of spring. That day it was raining, cold and dark. There had been murders, a triple homicide with all the fixings of a sex crime. There were 2 apartments sharing a thin wall in between the bedrooms. The wall had been ripped through by something with the physical strength of a grizzly bear. A young couple who had been living in one had been torn to shreds, and the remains of the other apartment occupants were few and far between. I'm not here to tell you all the wild theories that the police had already concocted by the time I arrived. I'm not going to give you all the ridiculous details about what they thought the magic circle drawn in the lone man's room was for. You can only imagine that they guessed he had been keeping some enormous big cat like a leopard or a tiger as a pet. I knew better. I spent days going over that scene, and the scenario which took shape in my research was so far-fetched, so crazy. I wasn't even able to submit the real results. However, it's time now for someone to know, and God knows I can't keep it any longer. Imagine you've got this young couple, and they love weed and they love sex. They've got so much paraphernalia for these 2 passions that it boggles the mind. It is a wonder that they ever found the time to maintain jobs they were so busy smoking and banging. Well, one day, this guy moves in next door, and everyone is just barely aware he even exists. He's the epitome of the quiet loner, and whatever he does mostly at night. Now, I'm just guessing that Mr. and Mrs. Clueless probably held back for a bit, but when there was no response from the other neighbor, they gradually started to let loose. Night after night, they're hammering away on each other, probably even getting turned on in their little stoned brains by the idea of someone listening. I don't judge. Now, what the dimwit duo doesn't realize is that old Mr. Loner has been quite a bit deceased for quite some time. Most likely since his 3rd night after moving in. See, our buddy the Quiet Man is into some really weird shit. The kind of stuff that the Cluelesses probably look up on the internet to get a good chill going for some late night scary sex. He's been hard at work, our friend the occultist. From his notes, he's kind of what I would describe as a horny psychopath. He doesn't want a lover, not this guy. He's looking for a slave, a very special kind of slave. He's been studying these things called tulpas, or thought forms. The idea being that under the right circumstances and through the right kind of disciplines, he can actually project a living being into reality. Sounds great, right? Create your own date, so to speak. The first problem being that in the process, he completely overdoses on the various mind-altering drugs that he has been using to boost his brain power. The second being that the images which were being projected to make this little weird science project come alive were not anywhere close to a normal variety. I don't know what the lonely stranger conjured in that room before he died. I can only tell you that it was powerful, hungry, and trapped inside the protective circle of the loner inscribed on the floorboards. Going by his sketches and fantasies, I can only picture something vaguely like a hauntingly sexual human female, but warped and twisted in all kinds of very disturbing ways. Think animalistic, hermaphroditic, and verging on undead with the psychological makeup of a cannibalistic succubus. So Tina the Tulpa is sitting there trapped in her little circle, just going nuts with rage, lust, and hunger. Somehow she manages to get hold of her creator's corpse and spends a few days using it the way your Boston Terrier uses a stuffed bear, a toy for sex and chewing. Now this whole time, the wannabe porn stars next door are still just swinging from the rafters every night, and unbeknownst to them, Tina is listening. I can only surmise that the desire inspired by these sessions was charging Tina's batteries. Slowly, she's getting hungrier and hornier until little by little, she begins to wear away at the edges of this little magic circle prison. So it's St. Patrick's Day, and the Cluelesses have been out all night at some sex club or whatever, just living the dream, and they come home hammered. It was storming that night, and the air was charged with electricity from this unbelievable freak February thunderstorm. They start going at it like they both just finished a 10-year stint in some state prison. At some point, while they're whooping and grunting and hollering, Tina the Tulpa breaks loose, and she knows just where she's going. Through that fucking wall.